Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Vito X DINO. I'm Vito Delsante. That guy's name is Dean Haspiel.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dean Haspiel.
We just want to let you guys know that you're dying slowly.
That's why we're here. That's why we're on the podcast.
Yeah, we're making it easier for you. Uh, we want to welcome our special guest today by the name of Neil Kleid. Neil Kleid is an American cartoonist who received, we were just talking about the Zurich Award last week, and for his graphic novella 90 Candles. He's also done uh, the book Murder Inc. One of my favorite ones actually is The Big Con, and he's done a bunch of other things. We're going to talk to him about everything and all today. Welcome, Neil Kleid.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Hey, Neil. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
I always credit The Big Con as being the graphic novel that taught me more about Judaism than I had ever been taught before. And granted, like I hadn't, been exposed to much of it growing up in Pennsylvania. I've always said that I grew up with a lot of Jewish people that were unaware of their Jewish background, that they were just like to them they were German, or something. So they didn't really um, have there are no synagogues in this area. The biggest synagogue is the Tree of Life, which was under attack a couple of years ago in Pittsburgh. But yeah, so like I always credit Neil and the Big Con for being the one thing that I could read and kind of get a lot of it. So
Well, that means a lot. I mean, that's really what the that book and some of the other books that I've done really like that's what it's all about. It's about like opening a window into a world that a reader might not really know about.
right.
And that's like that you hit me right here.
Do you ever get not pushback per se, but do you ever get publishers or editors saying that's a little too this side than being a general kind of down the middle thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to say, everybody kind of jumps quickly to like people who are, anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic or, like, and I don't want to say that I've ever really hit that.
Mhm.
I have hit a lot in my career of folks who have just been pretty like, it's too niche, right? It's too niche. I have had an editor tell me once for a pitch, can you make it less Jewish? Which was fun to hear. And then, I mean, even more recently, right, I did a book with Comixology last year called Nice Jewish Boys, which is a crime comic set in my town, Teaneck, New Jersey. And to be perfectly blunt, we're having trouble placing it at a publisher, right? Right now, look, there's a little Israel content in it. There's, it's clearly very Jewish. And so I think right now publishers are somewhat hesitant to really embrace a lot of Jewish literature right now. And it's frustrating and maddening because the story is a really relatable story, right? It's relatable to whether you're Jewish or not. It's about family, it's about ethics and responsibility. But the trappings, the package in which it is, I think, have really just made it difficult. So I know there's a lot of others, other than me, that have had the same problem, right? And so it's an issue, and it's especially right now when I think Jews need more representation in literature, comics, film, media, books. Like it's tough when you kind of hit a roadblock like that.
I I I want to just talk a little bit more about what makes something too much Jewish. So, like for instance, I've been told that my art is a little too cartoony, let's say, and I think I know what that means, and sometimes I hope the person making the criticism knows what that means, even though it's not a bad thing. It just might not fit what the project might need to look like or something, or you're too much, it's too superhero-y or too whatever, like, but too Jewish. Do you think is it a too much history in the, or what makes it too much Jewish, do you think?
I don't know. I think this specific one was actually for a superhero book, and it was. I think the problem was. I mean, I'll just sort of say it. It was a Ragman book, right?
I
And
was gonna
so
assume it's Ragman. Yeah.
yeah, and it was a what I would call. People told me like you're trying to pitch who's technically or was at the time a C-level character, right? A character who doesn't really have a fan base. We don't know if we can sell it on its own as it is. And now to sort of make it about like there was a lot of Kabbalistic themes in it. There were things about just like World War II and what have you, and it was very like rooted in like Hebraic magic. And the concern was that it wasn't broad enough, right? Like, how are we going to market this? How are we going to sell it? And I mean, personally, I think that's what you should be doing with a character like Ragman, like kind of lean into it, right? Because that's what sets that character apart, right? Like what sets Daredevil apart. Daredevil, obviously, he's blind and crime and what have you, but like the Catholicism, like the faith, like that's really what Daredevil's all about.
And also
And
because it's like a C level, D level character, you can take those risks.
right,
You think.
right. Well, and maybe it was C-level character, no name writer. Like it could have been a lot of things, but I mean that was a note I got, which was like, can we make this a little more broad? I don't think it was, and I didn't take it as like, oh, this person like hates Jews or this person doesn't think the Jewish faith, right? I just think it was more of like, hey, we have to hit a sales quota, and so is there a market for a very Jewish Ragman book right now?
But to speak to Vito's point, I think that's super stupid because you have general superheroes up the wazoo, right? Why not get specific with this without hitting someone over the head? Like make it part obviously of the story and let this be a Jewish character. I remember I didn't realize what Moon Knight. Is he a third Jew from his one of
Right.
his personalities or something, or is
Well,
he
so
full
the
Jew
main,
or
the main, yeah, the main one, Mark Spector is Jewish. His father was a rabbi. He's not, and like Vito, you were just talking a little bit earlier about like more traditional Judaism, right? Somebody who's not necessarily as orthodox or religious as I am. There wasn't a lot of that in Moon Knight. I think was it Zelensky when he wrote it, he kind of infused a lot of that into the character. But even in the last couple of years, you've had a couple of people kind of like tap at the background there. But I mean, he's a Jewish character, but I wouldn't say that his narrative is like hung upon the Judaism. I
Right.
actually found it really interesting because he's a Jewish guy who is really like working with an Egyptian god, and Jews and Egyptian,
Right.
in biblical times, there's a lot of conflict there, and I find it fascinating that nobody has called that out.
mm, you should
But
write a story and pitch it.
yeah. Yeah, but the appeal to me, at least with the Ragman idea that you were just talking about, is the Kabbalistic Judaic magic, things that we don't never I don't know that I've ever seen any of that in a comic, so why wouldn't you again take the risk on a C-level character to because they did it with Walt Simonson when Thor when he took over Thor is a failing book and he made it a must read. So why wouldn't you take that tact and take the risk? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Like if you don't make a lot of money on it, just I don't know, print it in Aramaic or something. I don't know, like change the actual language of it. And
Well,
put it out there.
you're also Vito, you're talking about 1983 Thor.
True,
Like,
true,
you know what I mean? Like today, uh, there are Thor movies and actors and agents and lawyers and everybody else and rich people investing in these movies right now.
mhm,
It's so different. You
right.
could take many more risks than today. But yeah, that's a shame because. And by the way, for the listeners who don't know who Ragman is a DC Comics character. It's not a character that Neil created, but he's always wanted to. In fact, we're going to do a whole I have a lot of stuff I want to have in the conversation here, but I wanted to say something when you said about synagogues. I don't even know if I've ever been in a synagogue, and I used to consider myself half Jewish, but I think I'm actually quarter Jewish technically because my father was half Jewish. But go ahead,
I'm
Neil.
going to disagree with you because you and I did a convention at a synagogue in Brooklyn a couple of years
Oh,
ago.
that's right. Okay, so
Yeah,
I have been in technically. You're right, but I meant like to go. I'm not religious. I haven't gone
right.
to, but my religion came from a newsstand on 79th Street and Broadway that was right in front of a synagogue. And it was, and me and Vito have been talking about the idea of doing something called newsstand superheroes because of something that Don Simpson mentioned just off the cuff. And we can talk about that later.
And
But I realized that my religion,
didn't you also say that like being in comics is being Jewish
absolutely.
at
I
one
actually
point?
said that at Juice.
Mhm.
Is that how you say it? Or Juicy?
Uh,
It's
I
a
think it's juice.
local
Yeah.
Jewish New York Comic Con type thing. Um, And that's actually where Neil won an award, I think, in the first year of that for writing, right? A
Yeah,
writer,
I was the writer honoree of the year. Yeah,
right?
Nice.
Right.
Congrats, man. I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
thank you.
And so anyway, I just remember thinking how comics became a religious experience for me. And obviously, comics basically were invented by Jews, and then there's a synagogue behind a newsstand. So whatever my percentage is or not, I also maintain as a New Yorker, a native New Yorker, you are Jewish
Hmm.
anyway, because of the culture that you steep in. So I also wanted to mention, and we don't have to make it all an hour and a half of Jewish comics, but
Why not?
come on, let's do it. Happy May the 4th, my friends.
He's wearing a Star
May
Wars
the
shirt.
wearing your Star Wars shirt. May the
I'm
4th
wearing a
be with
There you
you.
go.
I'm wearing a Taskmaster shirt in honor of
Of the Thunderbolts.
Thunderbolts, which I haven't seen yet, Dean.
Me neither.
I'm
Me neither.
wearing a Kylo Ren Darth Vader t-shirt.
And I'm
Just all
also
black.
I'm holding I got the dark
The
saber.
dark saber.
Yeah.
Wait, so you haven't seen Thunderbolts, Vito?
No, not yet.
And Neil, no?
I was gonna, but
I'm going to see it next week. Actually, I I for those who can see the Detroit line, I'm from Detroit. I live in New Jersey, but I'm from Detroit. My whole family is in Detroit. My brother lives there, and he and I kind of when we grew up, we were like collecting comics together. We both kind of got into it together, and we never are together when any of these movies come out. Like we've never gone to see any of the Marvel movies, any of the DC movies, and so next week we're actually both going to Kentucky for my 50th birthday. We're going on a vacation, and we're one of the plans is for the two of us to see Thunderbolts together.
Oh, that's awesome. It's a great movie. I love it. It's one of my favorite Marvel movies, and you'll see why. It's funny you say about not seeing a movie with your brother. Um, I still get a lump in my throat whenever I go to movies like a Marvel or a DC or a Star Wars or whatever, anything that me and my brother used to go to, and he passed away 16, 17 years ago. And I always think about my brother and Seth Kushner and a couple other people have passed away that I get to see this next thing that they are not able to see, at least that I know of that they're not able to see. I don't know about ghosts and resurrections or whatever. We all read and write comics, so anything goes, right?
that's why you need a ragman around.
Oh yeah,
Just wear the costume.
And
that's
You know,
right.
your brother, older or younger?
Neil.
no. That
Was your brother older or younger?
Oh, me? My
No,
brother's
no, no.
younger.
I know your brother.
Yeah.
I thought we were talking to Dean. My brother's older. He's older.
Okay, how much? Like how many years?
2 years. 2 years.
Okay. So was there a time in your comics reading childhood where you were stealing his stuff and trying to like was he trying to impress upon you like something to read? Like, oh, if you want to be cool, you got to read this, that kind of thing, or
Yeah, he's always been sort of like ahead of me on a lot of this stuff. He's very big into like right now he reads a lot of like the stuff from the 70s, right? He's been reading a lot of like Legion of Superheroes and he loves Warlock, like Adam Warlock and all that. And I never got into any of that. And I was all sort of about like what was sort of uh, big in the day, like in the moment, right? Like what's on the stands today. And he was always looking back at older stories and kind of getting into the history. And so he would always kind of come to me and say, like, oh, you should really read this story, the Great Darkness Saga. You would love it. Or Justice Society or what have you. And we kind of have the same sort of like likes and dislikes. Like right now, I know that he's been reading a lot of like the DC Comics Black Label stuff, like Human Target, Strange Adventures, all that. And we both were really into Starman. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about comics, just like sharing what we're reading on a given week or what have you. But when we came up, it wasn't like any animosity or like stealing or what have you. It was more just like, hey, have you read this? You should read this. I want to read it first or what have you. Um, yeah.
You're reminding me, like, I was just thinking about how when I was young and getting into comics, at age 12, I basically was like, I'm a Fantastic Four fan. I'm going to buy every Fantastic Four, and I have bought every Fantastic. And one day I'm going to pencil canon Fantastic Four, and I have. even though I'd like to be able to write and draw my own story kind of thing. But I remember I was like the custodian in my friends, my group of friends. I was the custodian of the Fantastic Four. Okay. My best friend Mike Houston was the Avengers fan. It's actually how we met. He had a Avengers comic in his hand, an old one, first day of school, and I walked up to him because I saw a kid with a comic book, and I was like, and we kind of had a tete-a-tete. It was like, oh, I'm a Fantastic Four fan. You're an Avengers fan. Like, we would take sides. It's almost like Coke, Pepsi, Mets, Yankees, that kind of stuff,
I had
And
the same.
and
I had the
well, I
same
was
thing.
gonna say real
That's
quick.
Robert. Yeah.
So then there was Sean Smith was in the X-Men, uh, and maybe also Teen Titans, but I think we all got into Teen because we were all Marvel fans. But then I would discover I would like cross the boundary of Fantastic Four and be like, all right, let me check out what's this going on over here. And then somebody was suddenly into Daredevil. And I remember but little by small, it's like all your friends who are into different comics, like, you would then exhaust your own what you loved and you were hungry for more. And suddenly you're into it all of it,
Yeah.
and I don't know why that was a thing did you and your brother Vito you don't have a sibling.
I have an older sister who I grew up with and a younger
That's
sister.
right.
My cousin Robert, who you've met at Baltimore, he's more like my little brother, and he and I had the same exact thing where he my and also my cousin Matthew, we were such pricks though because like we would pick all the good stuff and Matt had to get all the bad stuff, like the stuff that we didn't want to read. You get to read Power Pack. Like we want to read Avengers and X-Men. You get Power Pack. You get whatever. Meanwhile, he's getting like my cousin Matthew's getting these like diamonds in the rough, like these like gems that we're not aware of. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
like, Power Pack crosses into X-Men, and I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
know who these kids are, like, and then he's got to tell me.
And that was a great comic. Louis Simonson and Jude
Yeah,
Brigman.
Yeah, yeah.
Brigman. Yeah,
Well, we
Oh my
we
God.
we well, we didn't start out. I mean, we started off because my dad was into comics, right? My dad loved comics. He was reading Lee and Kirby, back when they were coming out on the newsstand, and so he would really come home with like a bag of comics every Friday and basically toss it at us and say like, read these and leave me alone because I had a hard day. And so, our first blush with comics, it was whenever he brought us home. And so it was really a mix of like superhero, like Archie, Harvey comics, a lot of Harvey comics, like Hot Stuff and Casper and Richie Rich and all that. And a lot of team up books, right? Like a lot of like DC Comics Presents.
hmm.
Um, and then eventually when like Marvel 2-in-1, Marvel Team Up came out, right? Like that's the stuff we started really reading. And that was sort of our gateway because we would like read a superhero in one of those team up books and say, like, Spider-Man, we all knew Spider-Man, but I didn't necessarily know who Havoc was, right? Like, and so that would be like that was one of my favorite Marvel team ups with Spider-Man and Havoc against like the Living Pharaoh, and
Mm.
that really like would jump me into the X-Men, and so eventually we started at the same place, but eventually we kind of got into our own groove, right? He would go off to heroes that he liked, and I would go off, and he would actually make fun of me for a long time because just like you were the Fantastic Four guy, Dean, I was the Blue Beetle guy. I love the
Uh,
Blue Beetle. And I read that 24 issue series and I would go back and try to look at like the gold, the old Blue Beetle stuff. And then eventually like, JLI came out, like that Amazing Justice League International series. And I was really into Blue Beetle. And any chance he got, he would make fun of Blue Beetle.
Is that the
so
Paris Collins series?
Yeah.
did
Yeah,
you read the Steve Ditko Charlton comics? The
So,
Charlton?
so eventually I went back. I actually got the first appearance. I grabbed a couple of them. But when I was like younger, I didn't have a way to get them. There was no internet at the time. I couldn't read them online. I couldn't find them, right? And so eventually, like I hunted some of them down. But
One of my first professional gigs at DC Comics, and every time somebody comes up to me with the copy of this comic, I cringe hard. I cringed back then. I want to say 1989 or 88 or something. There was this bonus book program that DC launched
yeah,
where they would have an extra, like, I don't know, was it 12 or 20 pages
it's
of
like 12,
comics?
right in the middle of the comic, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I had done a Batman one where it was awful. I don't even know how my name is on that. Anyway, but the second one, they let me do another one. And the other one was Booster Gold and Blue Beetle. And I penciled it, fell off a roof, broke both my legs and my drawing hand and inked it in a wheelchair while at college. And it's bad,
None
man.
of this is surprising to me, Dean.
Yeah.
No, I am not surprised.
So there might be a Blue Beetle story out there maybe you haven't and shouldn't read.
I don't think I actually have read that one. And now, do you know what issues
It was in an issue of Justice League International,
It was
like a
during the
bonus
Adam
one.
Hughes run, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. And by the way, so you're looking at Adam Hughes art with
Wait,
James DeMatteis writing,
but it's
and
not
then you
Adam
come
Hughes
upon
like
me.
now. It's not
What?
Adam Hughes that we know today. This was like young Adam Hughes that looks like a combination of Kevin McGuire and Chris Spress. So it's
right?
not like,
Oh, you said Adam Hughes. I was actually thinking Kevin McGuire. I
oh,
can't remember who. Either way, both those guys
oh, sure.
still to this day blow me out the water. Like you come upon this other comic, and you're probably like you start to cry because like, mommy, somebody hurt my comic book with this artwork. And you're just like, what is going on in this comic? I want to put it back in the rack and get the right one. You know, like what just happened to my comic? It got diseased. I wanted to talk also about our origin. Like I don't know when you first met Vito, but I remember meeting you. Was it at a Tower Records in Manhattan?
So
Can you tell that?
that's my comics origin story. My comics origin story is I moved to New York, didn't know anybody, came here and I started acting. Actually, my wife doesn't like me to talk about this, but I was doing like terrible acting on the Upper East Side, and I had access to a theater, and the creative director was like, "Hey, you can use the theater if you ever want for like comic book stuff," and I'm like, "What the hell would I do at a theater?" And I said, "Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw like a mini Comic Con." And so I basically said I'm gonna have like a bunch of indie, like I knew some like indie folks at the time, like really like not even like indie, like people like garage folks, right? Like people who were like me at the time, didn't know anyone, were doing mini comics, what have you. And so I reached out to a couple of them and I was like, listen, I'll give you a table, come here, sell your books, and I'm gonna put on like a show, right? I'm gonna write like a play, like a superhero play, and the actors will be in it. And then I hired. You guys remember Kabam, that superhero improv group that Steve Wacker from
Oh
Marvel?
yeah.
Yeah, and so I had Kabam come and do a show, and then I was like, you know what's going to be sort of like the thing that I'm going to reach for? I'm going to cold email. At the time, Mike Carlin was editor in chief at DC, and Quesada had just started at Marvel. And I cold emailed them. I got a hold of their email addresses, and I was like, "Listen, you don't know me. I'm a guy on the Upper East Side. I've done one like self-published comic. Um, can you guys come and do? You've never done a panel together. Why don't you guys come and do a panel about like comics and film at this theater?" And to my surprise, they both agreed. And Quesada actually brought Axel Alonso with him as well. So the three of them did a panel, and I got to moderate it. It was a lot of fun. But, and I'm getting there, Dean, but what I needed to do was go market this thing. And so I printed up a bunch of flyers, I put them around, and I think message boards were kind of coming into their own at the time. And so you and a bunch of folks were signing Bizarro Comics, the first volume of Bizarro Comics at Tower Records in Union Square. And I said to some friends of mine, this is the perfect place for me to go promote this thing. And I went down there with a bunch of flyers and I was handing them out. And I got the book. And as I was signing it, I basically handed it to each one of you. And you and I just started chatting. You, me, I think I was talking to Evan Dorkin for a little bit. And it was one of these like, hey, you're in comics, now you're part of us. And
Right.
that made me feel really great. And then we kind of, I don't remember how we connected after that, but we got in
I
touch.
don't remember if I went to that actual talk or not. I do remember going to a theater, and I can't remember. Did you put another thing on at this theater, or was it just the one thing
I
you
think it was just
curated?
the one thing, and I think maybe I saw you then at like the first New York Comic Con or something, and we like met through Jeff Mason, and that's I just kind of got into like friendly with you and Nick Bertozzi and Josh Neufeld and a bunch of folks
Well,
at
what you
that point.
did was what I always advise people when they ask me about making comics or being a creator at all. I was like, show up to your own party. There's a party you're having that you're celebrating, that's a business, that's a celebration, that's a work ethic. You showed up. So if you start showing up, you're a part of the community. Do you know what
Yeah,
I'm
totally.
saying?
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's how.
there's no ticket to entry. You just got to be part of it. And Vito, I think we met at Hanley's,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna say probably when you were doing mini comics, we probably met, when you were bringing them in and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I was bringing them in on consignment. And then I started doing some of the odd signing here and there.
Hmm.
I think we did a 90 candle signing if I recall. I don't
I
remember.
I don't doubt it. I couldn't remember who else would be there, but like I'm sure that there was like one of those gangbang signings where we put a bunch of different self-publishers and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. But that's
And
yeah.
that's your origin. And then you and I have collaborated, but I want to get to the one we didn't get to do. And I
There's a
was trying to
lot.
remember,
There's a
did we
lot that we
do?
didn't get to do.
Well, there's a lot, but there's one specific that I don't know if Vito knows about it, but um, and I don't have the pitch anymore. Oh yeah, there was a couple though. Well, so what I remember doing with you is a Wildcat Perry White story,
Yeah,
which I loved, and it had
That was the
the
Superman 80-page giant or something, right?
yeah,
that's
yeah.
right, that's right, and it also had like Jack Kirby gangsters. It had the
The
Guardian.
Guardian was in it. Yeah, yeah.
Guardian. It was a bunch of characters. You packed a lot. We also did a Wonder Woman like from the 1940s with Etta Candy and
Dead
Ra's
Man
al
Remember
Ghul
that?
and Dead Man.
and Dead Man. I mean, that was a lot packed into that too. And did we do anything else that got published and that was sold in public? Do you remember? Or those are the two,
Just
right?
the two, just those two. We pitched a lot together. We pitched to Marvel a couple of things.
Yeah.
That one of them got close.
Was
One
that
of
the
them,
one for Epic?
yeah, that was the epic one.
If I'm correct, that was Jack of Hearts, Ant-Man, and Thanos.
Yep, it was.
Talk
Neil is
about
Jack of
that.
Hearts, man. He could tell you stories. I bet you if we sat down and just said, "Hey, Neil, rattle off every Jewish character you could," and like me and Dean would have to guess who's Jewish and who's not, I guarantee you neither of us would get all of them right.
Yeah, no, there's a healthy list.
There is.
Well, wait. Jewish superhero characters you mean from Marvel and DC?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a lot. Is there a lot, Neil?
There's a decent amount, right? I
There's
mean,
more than you probably realize too, Dean.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, because unless they're wearing a yarmulke, what the hell? How do I know if they're Jewish or not? Like Jesus Christ over here. But I remember when and I talked to Carl Kiesel about it when he confirmed that Ben Grimm, aka the Thing from the Fantastic Four, is Jewish, right?
Yeah.
And they did that one issue where he's like, "Oh, I'm Jewish." And then Harvey Pekar wrote a story between him and the Thing that Ty Templeton got to draw.
Yeah.
That was a fun story about being Jewish. But I remember there wasn't too many stories after that. But then it wasn't until Carl Kiesel wrote that story that it clicked to me that the Thing is a golem.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's
It
a lot
never occurred to me before that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Golem coded maybe, but definitely this protector to this protector character, that's definitely part of his roots. I'm sure
Especially
a lot of it was
neighborhood.
inspired by that.
Like that
Um,
neighborhood growing up, like for Kirby, was a typically like almost I wouldn't say 100%, but it was definitely predominantly Jewish on Delancey Street and stuff. So it made
And
sense.
Italian, probably Italian and
Yeah.
Jewish. I mean, and these are the people who created the comics industry in a lot of ways.
and
The
some
type.
folks, I think since that, folks have picked it up, right? That you got Dan Slott who did his Bar Mitzvah issue, and
Right.
actually my favorite thing, it's not even in the comics. My favorite thing is I don't know if you guys watch the, Vito. I know you got younger kids. The Spidey and His Amazing Friends show that's on Disney Plus. You ever watch
Oh,
that?
with Gwen and Miles together,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And they've done two episodes where one is a Rosh Hashanah episode and one is a Passover episode with the Thing, and that's actually,
Really?
yeah,
The
those
Thing
are
shows up with the cartoon?
yeah.
Oh, who's doing the voice? I wonder what he sounds like.
Oh, I don't,
Oh man, now I gotta watch it.
yeah, no,
It looked really cool, and I
it's
think
fun. It's
who's
fun.
writing Christos Gage? I think he's writing a comic book adjacent version of that kind of world or
Yeah,
version. That's a lot of fun. So we did those. Can you remind me, or do you remember the Jack of Hearts story? Just because I
yeah.
doubt it'll ever get done.
It was a Fantastic Voyage ripoff. It was at the time Jack of Hearts was in this suit, the suit that he's got, but he was like shooting off radiation, and he had to be in this room for 15 hours a day.
Remember that?
Like Tony Stark put him in this room, and the idea was that at some point in his life he had dated this girl and ended up like the radiation had gotten into her, and she had like 24 to 48 hours to before she died, and he had to shrink down with Ant-Man to go inside and like remove the radiation. That was the idea. It was this
Yeah.
crazy fun, and I think the reason we teamed them up is because at the time Jack Hartz and Ant-Man hated each other, and so it was
Hmm.
like a buddy comedy with two characters that hated each other. And
Hmm.
then the villain ended up being Thanos, and I don't remember why it was Thanos, but it was your idea was to put Thanos in like a three-piece suit.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
it was just a crazy pitch. It was one of those pitches where you're like, this is never going to get made, and they loved it. They were
They
like,
greenlit it. It was going to be for Epic Comics, or when Epic went from the magazine and went from, I guess, I don't remember how many years it had been defunct, but then they were bringing it back. And I think they came out with one or two comics and then it went away again.
yeah, like Robert Kirkman did one, and then there were two others, and then it died.
Yeah,
And it died right as I was writing the script. Like we
I
had
remember that.
gotten the outline, fully greenlit, and then it was like, all right, go write it. And then a week later, we heard Epic died.
Now we talk comics talk all the time. Now, haven't you been in the middle of writing other things that died and got the rug pulled out from under you as well, or am I thinking of someone else?
No, it was me.
No, it was me.
It
Way to
was
bring
me.
it up.
I had two things, both at DC actually. One was a Legends of the Dark Knight three issue thing when they were doing the digital Batman comic. Um, Hank Canals had greenlit a three-issue arc. It was him versus I don't know if you know the character, the Wrath. The
Mhm.
Wrath is
Michael
like,
Golden character.
pardon?
Michael Golden character, I
Yeah,
believe.
the Michael Golden character who's like supposed to be like the anti-Batman. He's like Batman, but like if he was evil. And it was a really fun story. And I had actually I wrote all three issues of it. And Howard Porter was going to draw it. And right as we handed the first script to Howard, for some reason, I guess the offices weren't talking. Detective Comics had just announced like this was the New 52 era, right? Right when they were doing the New 52, and they announced a new version of the Wrath coming out, like a more like hardcore version. And I quickly emailed Hank, and I'm like, "What does that mean for our story?" And he's like, "Well, the story's dead now." And
Oh,
so it was just like a bad case of editors not talking to one another. And I mean, I got paid, which was really kind of nice, but it never came out. Like I've got the scripts just sort of sitting on my hard drive.
oh my God. I mean, Vito doesn't have a similar story,
Oh,
but
I do have a similar story.
is that you would consider that, Vito's Superman story?
Yeah, yeah, the Superman story that was an inventory story that came, right? Yeah.
Well, the story I was talking about, Dean, or that I was referring to was the Wildcat story for JSA Classified that was paid for. Um, Eric White was doing the cover for, he was going to do the initial art, but then he decided he couldn't. So he was going to do layouts for Michael Cho to do the finishes, which would have been the most beautiful comic ever. And it was basically Wildcat versus, um, I forget the bad guy, but it was in uh, Atlantic City, and like you find out why Wildcat doesn't go to Atlantic City, that kind of thing. But the Superman thing uh, wasn't inventoried at first. It was for Superman Confidential. Then it got inventoried. Then it got slotted in because of a weird confluence of events.
Isn't it always a weird confluence of events,
I
though?
I mean, sometimes they work to your benefit, but like yours, like that's a shame. Like that. I mean, but then you got paid, so I mean that's a good thing.
Right. I mean, I would have liked to have come out, but they did right by me, and I have no ill will. I totally get it.
Didn't
The
we have another pitch? Our Man? Did we do something? Did you write something?
I wrote no, I wrote an Hour Man short for. I wanted to put it into a new Bizarre, like what if they were going to do a third Bizarro volume. I had like a very short Hour Man thing where basically it's ridiculous. Hour Man decides that he can't use Miraclo anymore because he's not a role model and it's addictive and what have you. And so he ends up making like putting his formula into pancakes. And so it's like Miracle pancakes, and he ends up getting really fat and can't fight anymore. That was the story. Yeah.
That's a bizarro tale. Sure. I always wanted to do something with Matter Eater Lad,
Yeah.
and me and Brad Meltzer had been teasing each other about how we were going to do a murder mystery with Matter Eater Lad someday.
I would read that in a heartbeat.
We'll see if that ever happens. But so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of any other ideas that you and I were
So
also.
I'll tell you, we pitched a Machine Man book.
That's right.
It was like a post-apocalyptic Machine Man book. That was fun. And I think it was Machine Man and Moon Boy, right?
Well, Devil Dinosaur
Oh,
was
and
going to
Devil
be
Dinosaur and Moon Boy.
right.
Right, right. It was
That's
Machine
right.
Man and Devil
I
Dinosaur.
think you were taking like when Jack came back to Marvel and trying to mash up a couple of those characters, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That would have been
Those,
Smart idea though. Like like it's kind of like doing fourth world stuff, but at Marvel. That's a really smart idea.
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Hell,
Thank
throw
you.
the Mad Bomb in it.
Oh
There you
my
go.
God,
Yeah.
the return of the Mad Bomb.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
I think actually, by the way, I think OMAC was in it. I think OMAC was in our pitch too.
I probably insisted on
No, it
that.
couldn't have been OMAC because that was not
Oh
Marvel.
no, it couldn't have been,
No,
but
but we
maybe
pitched an OMAC book. I think we did pitch an OMAC book together.
I can't remember. I know that Nick Bertozzi and I pitched an OMAC book, which would have been the ninth issue because Jack only did 8. And then I think there was more stuff that happened after that, but without Jack Kirby.
Right.
I mean, he literally ended it. A panel just suddenly, and then the world explodes or something, or there's a big explosion. Like he just was out, right? So whatever, he didn't even wrap up some. So me and Nick Bertozzi, and it was more Nick's idea, came up with a story called Revolution Number 9, which is like a Beatles song, right? But it would be the 9th issue, and it was going to introduce OWAC, One Woman Army Corps. And then that never went anywhere. It almost got through. Joey Cavallari was going to maybe be the editor, and then it didn't go anywhere. And then years later, when I was doing the Red Hook, I came up with War Cry, Human of Mass Destruction, which was my OWAC. Anyway, that's what happened to that.
The only other thing that was a could have been that I pitched, and I was going to put you in as the artist if they picked it up, was I pitched a Fantastic Four noir series, which
I
was
want to talk about this because I did the same thing, but I didn't use Dean. I want to.
Oh, talk about it, guys. I want to
Yeah,
hear
I
about
want to hear what yours was because
mine was basically about Ben Grimm as a Jewish gangster, right? So Ben Grimm, Jewish gangster, and Reed Richard is like was the rival gangster. I have it somewhere around here, and it was like a turf war on Yancey Street. That's really what it was.
Mine was Ben was a professional wrestler, like a Gorgeous George type. I mean, in that era, with Sue as the femme fatale. I think Reed was not a gang member or gang leader, but he was something. He was a criminal of some kind, as was Johnny. But yeah, it was just. Oh, that's so funny. How great minds think alike, I guess.
Yeah.
Not great enough, but
I would love if one day, I mean, you know how they do like the Voices anthologies, if they did I mean, it's a different kind of anthology, but like a rejected pitch anthology, just like a one-off story from all these rejected pitches, because I've got some great ones that I'm like, man, this would have been. I pitched a Circus of Crime one shot, right? Like, come on, man.
I think I had to draw the Circus of Crime. Well, no, it wasn't. That's Spider-Man. It was a Cyclops one shot that had all these villains. Batroc was in it. Some circus characters, villains were in it as well. Baron Zemo. I was like, what is going on? Like 24 pages. There's so many characters. And I never figured out who the writer was because they wouldn't tell me. And then I started thinking, are like 9 editors writing this story? And then they did that thing that is a no-no where like they come upon a situation and they say fight scene, 3 pages. That was it. So now I'm writing the damn comic and I got to come up with a situation with Cyclops fighting like 6 different people. And then you got to get to the page where like, and then you're moving forward. So I had to get to that point in the book somehow. And I was like, what is going on here? This is insane, So
Let me ask you this, Dean, because we work together and I've worked with a lot of artists over the years. Do you prefer it when a writer choreographs a fight scene for you?
only if there is a reason. Like the nullifier, right? Is maybe you're doing something with the nullifier, the ultimate nullifier is being handed back to that character who then maybe tries to shoot it but doesn't have, or maybe Thor's hammer, like when there's a reason, right? But what I don't like is upper left panel is the thinnest panel of the whole, and it should be this. And like let the artist be an artist. Like
Yeah.
you as a writer can actually I would even say, I mean, a lot of great comic book writers are also artists or else understand how to at least thumbnail a page or something, because the artist is going to have to try to figure that out. In fact, I did a Superman story with Sina Grace. It was only 10 pages. And I actually was having trouble with some of the ideas that was going on and what was he imagining. So I asked him, because he's an artist, I said, do you have any layouts that you were, when you were thumbnail, when you were writing? He said, absolutely. I said, could you share them with me? So I actually asked for him because I was struggling with some aspects of the story. But in general, I prefer to at least take my first crack at it. But when it gets very super specific, it should have a cinematic reason, is the way I would.
Yeah, I'd love to go back and look at this. I haven't read that script in a while, but what I loved was when we did the Perry White story, which if you haven't read it, it's a lot of talking heads, right? There's some fight scenes which are great, but there's a lot of like the name of the story is Old Men Talking in Bars, right? And it's really like Perry White and Wildcat bonding over their kids at a bar.
Was Slam Bradley not in that? I thought he was for.
No Slam Bad. No Slam. Actually, it's funny because the original story was Perry White and Guardian. And they didn't want to put Guardian in as the main character, and we came up with Wildcat being like a great lead for it. But we got Guardian in there, which was a lot of fun. But there was one scene where they're sitting at the bar, and you have the panels like following the path of the bar, which is really cool. Which was really cool, and I was like I didn't have to ask Dean to do that. Like Dean knows what he's doing. I don't have to.
Well, you try to have fun, and yet you're trying to serve the story, because I realize sometimes you can overdo it. It's like you're voguing and you're letting the art kind of take over the story, and it can be a little confusing, to be honest, unless you follow the word balloons, right? So I've gone back and forth between how much can I play with visual storytelling versus just serving the story.
But Neil, you're also a cartoonist, so you kind of have a little bit of an edge in that respect for layouts. Did that not, like, do you lean too heavily on the writing side because you were working with Dean, or was there a different sensibility that you were going into it with?
You mean to the story that we did,
or any of them really? But yeah, but this one
so
specifically.
I think what's great. So look, I'm a cartoonist, but I draw very slow. And my style is very specific. But what's great about being an artist is that I can visualize what's sort of in my mind, and without giving an artist like a very clear, like Dean saying, like left panel thin, like I can basically kind of get a sense of like spatial layouts and like weird things should be and what have you, and I can recommend. And a lot of times that's what I'm doing. Like I'll basically say like this is what it could be, and I tell every artist, like I put like a page of notes at the beginning of every script, and it's like, hey man, like you're the artist,
Right?
you know better than me, right? Like anything I offer you is a potential recommendation, but if you have a better idea, go for it. And unless it breaks the narrative, right? Unless it like destroys something that, like Dean says, like if the nullifier doesn't get handed from hand to hand, like then we have to talk about that. um and almost every artist I work with, or every co-author, right, has really kind of risen to the occasion and said like, well, I'm going to make this my own. And so what I try not to do is really be overly descriptive. I've definitely done that in the past, but what I'm trying to do is really let my co-author kind of lead the way.
Is that like a hallmark you think of like beginner writers, like being overly descriptive in panel descriptions, you think?
Yeah, and I mean, I did it when I was a beginning writer. I definitely wrote like an Alan Moore treatise for every panel, and uh, there's also other things, right? How many panels, how many balloons are you putting in the panel, right? How many words are you putting on the page? One of the ones that I love that I had to learn when I was younger was, look, it's static art. You can't put two actions in one panel, right? You can't say like somebody takes the ball and then puts it over here. And so the way you write the panel description is like it's a shot of this versus like talking about the action specifically, so you can think it just in like the snapshot. Because actually, when I did this book, The Panic, for Comixology, I worked with Andrea Moody, I don't know if you know Andrea,
Mhm.
great painter. And he really like pushed back on it. Like he was great. Like we had a nice push-pull relationship, and we were like I loved working with him, and I think he liked working with me. Where he was like, "Listen, this is what your description says, but like I don't have enough space for all these people, so let's talk about this." And we worked through it, you know. So even I think when you're not a beginning art writer, sometimes you can fall into that trap.
You guys both come from your background is acting a little bit, right? Um, and but you're both writers who understand comics. Now, Vito, I don't think you've ever written a play. I forget. Have you written a play, Neil? And the reason why I asked is because you guys are very theatrical, at least with your words and dramatic in your scenes. And I think one of the reasons why I wrote plays is because plays there's a lot more talking. In comics, you're kind of begging for action or something to happen, you know. Otherwise, and I love Brian Michael Bendis, but he's famous for his talking pages, right? Like that's what he does
For his
very
work
well.
alone, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. But have you ever tell us about theater or playwriting?
Well, I mean, the theater stuff I did was just because, like, when I grew up in Detroit, like, I came from a pretty religious Jewish community where I didn't do acting, and I couldn't. There was not a lot of opportunity. And so when I moved to New York in 1999, suddenly I had this city, at my feet, and really,
Mhm.
if I found the opportunity, I seized it. And so I had a friend who had this theater group and said, like, hey, you should come hang out with us. And I did, and we did some improv comedy. I actually took some classes at Upright Citizens Brigade downtown, um, and got to do a little bit of improv and a little bit of terrible Shakespeare. Um, but I did write a play called American Caesar, which was took Julius Caesar and kind of set it in the 2008, the Lehman Brothers crisis, right? The financial collapse set on Wall Street, and we put it up for a week somewhere in Midtown. And it was fine. We had some people come, and then I tried adapting it as a graphic novel with this wonderful Irish artist, Owen Coveney, but nobody really wanted to pick it up. So it's just kind of been sitting around. And lately, I've been dabbling a little bit in screenwriting. I wrote a TV pilot a couple years ago, and then I'm actually working on a screenplay right now. Just trying to. I wrote a short film recently that I'm trying to get
Mm.
funded to shoot somewhere around here with Arnon Shore, who's another Jewish writer who I don't know, Dean, if you met at the
At Juice, I think I met
yeah.
him. Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that's a fun one. It's about a father and son out at like a diner, like a cat style diner, and the son basically finds out that his father was a Jewish gangster in like Las
Hmm.
Vegas, and it's just about like
Hmm.
family secrets. And so, um,
Right.
like I think at a certain point, and this is something that I thought maybe we would talk about, but maybe we won't. Like the comics industry is rough going at the moment, and opportunities get a little thin on the ground, and you want to try your hand at something else, right? So, like the last couple of years, I've done some prose work, a novel here, a short story here, and I'm doing a little bit more of that. Like I'm writing a short story that's hopefully going to come out next year.
Didn't
Uh,
you write a Kill Raven, Spider-Man?
Raven, not
Craven.
Sorry,
Kilgrave.
Craven, not Kill Raven.
Yeah,
Craven.
no, I adapted Craven's last time, yeah, into a novel. And so, like, I'll seize those opportunities where I can because as a writer, I just want to try everything and I want to, work in several mediums. But I love comics and I don't think I'll ever leave comics behind. It's just I have to kind of figure out, especially as I'm 2 weeks away from 50, like, what's my relationship with comics? I'm at the crossroads now, right?
And you're a father and you're responsible for human beings. No, we can talk all about how tough comics is more than ever right now. But it also sounds like you have, I don't know if they're completed projects, but you have projects that have quote not been sold to other publishers. What about self-publishing? What about Kickstarter crowdfunding?
Yeah,
So,
so I mean that's where my head was sort of at this year, right? So I kickstarted. I didn't do it. I did it with Outland Entertainment, who does a lot of Kickstarter works. We kickstarted Kings and Canvas, which was a book I did for Monkey Brain Comics back in 2015 with Jake Allen and Frank Reynoso. You know Frank.
yep, he was in my
Um,
studio.
yep. And so that book had just sort of sat around. We actually never even finished it. We didn't do this. The first arc never finished. And so we came to Outland with it and said, hey, do you want to collect this? And we'll do the sixth issue for the collection. and it did well. People seem to like it, and it's out, and I was very nervous about it. And so that was really kind of my foray into like my like dipping my toe into potentially doing more crowdfunding. And I have actually another project that I'm trying to potentially do, which is reprint this book I did with Dark Horse a couple years ago called Saber with John
Mhm.
Broglia and Frank again. Um,
Mhm.
and so we want to do like a more definitive version that collects some of these short stories that we've been doing over the last year and a half.
Right.
Um, and I'd like to do more of it. Unfortunately, right now, I think it's a little scary to do crowdfunding because I don't, there's printing issues at the moment, right? There's supply issues, and I'm not really.
Sure, but yes and no. Yes and no, because I feel like it's become even more cumbersome. Like the minute you pull the trigger on a new Kickstarter, there's also another 30 launching that week. And I'm talking about comics. So something's going on where they seem to be getting funding. Now funding is funny because you try to do a low number, so you get the low number to say, "Oh, we succeeded, but we need more money." And do you even get the goal that
Right.
you really need? I don't know. And then for me, in my case, I'm keeping them at 24-page projects because they're doable, but it means that I have to sacrifice 3 months of my life to then recoup those 3 months and hopefully get enough money to pay for the printer's costs and then the week it takes me to package and ship and all that stuff. It's a lot of grunt work.
Right. It's also tough because as a writer, right, I mean, I could draw my own comic, right?
Right, but you have to.
But generally, I'm partnered up with somebody, right? I'm
Right.
co-authoring it with someone, and so like, does that person get paid? Like, who gets the money, right?
Who
So
gets the money, or how much do they need before you're getting some of the profit, let's call it, or whatever. And but what I would encourage you, and I want to get to another part soon. I have a couple other subjects I want to get into,
yeah, yeah,
if you have the time. But is this ragman idea, right? I remember I don't remember if I was asked to pitch a ragman story years ago, and it didn't go anywhere because of my idea, and I don't really remember my idea. I know it's on my laptop, but I then called the Ragman. I called him the Weave, right? So I had this idea called the Weave, and I'd have to go look at the paragraph I wrote, right? But where's your forget DC's Ragman? Where's your 24-page superhero comic that's possibly doable with an artist that you could maybe crowdfund?
yeah. No, you're not wrong. I've had some folks in the industry basically say like, just take the idea, file off the serial numbers, and make it your own, right? Um, I actually I actually tried to get a superhero anthology, like a Jewish superhero anthology, going this year with some of these characters. It didn't pan out for whatever reason, but I do have characters. It's really just about the confluence of finding the right co-author who is willing to really say, yeah, I'll do this if you crowdfund this, and we can make it happen. I haven't really found that partner yet.
Sure, sure.
Um, I do have, look, you know me, I've got plenty of ideas. It's just about, do I have enough time? And yeah, you sort of hit the nail on the head earlier. I have kids and a mortgage, which means I have a
Yeah,
good job.
yeah.
And, it's just the time that I have for myself. Like, what am I focused on? And usually it's paying work comes first and then trying to get some of the stuff together. Um, I'll tell
And
you,
Go ahead. I was say Vito also has the same issue as a writer, is finding that co-author, and Vito has a billion ideas. Like. So, were
Sorry.
you gonna say, Neil? Though you gonna say something?
no, no,
Sorry.
no. I was going to say, like, I was pretty lucky. I've been pretty lucky because I've been working with Comixology for the last couple of years. I did two books with them, and I'm working on a third now. And they've been really, that's honestly like been one of my best working partnerships with, and they're not really even a publisher; it's a reseller, right? Because they, can pay my artists what they're worth, right? They can pay these co-authors what they really need to get the work done. John basically came to me and said, "Here's my rate," and they said, "Yeah, we'll meet it," right? And and the only sort of drawback with that, again, like we said, sort of at the top of this, is whether it gets somehow into print, because it's all digital.
Yeah.
Um, but in those cases, sometimes it works itself out, and sometimes it'll eventually work itself out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The crowdfunding aspect of it, I also think that there's a part of it, and I don't know if, I know, Dean, you've done a couple, and Vito, I think you've done a couple too, or tried a couple. Yeah. I don't know that I have the head for the administrative aspects of it, right?
Mm.
I
I
know
think
that
you'd be
you,
surprised. I think
yeah,
you'd be surprised
I
what
know
you're
it can
forced
be
into.
learned. I've spoken to a couple of people, like Mike Oming, and I had a long chat about it, and um, I know it can be learned. I think I'm just a little nervous.
Oh, we all are. Every time I've done it, I've been super nervous. And then that's what you're doing for a month, or however long the campaign is, plus everything else you're doing, right? And so you just got to deep dive. And I don't know, man. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the Jewish tribe backs each other. And I feel like if you leaned into a Jewish hero, a New York Jewish hero, I think you'd be surprised at the reaction. I mean, pro and con, right? Whatever, but pro, definitely.
No,
Vito,
I don't think you're wrong, and I think there's an appetite for it.
that's what I mean. Like, it's right there, it's right in front of you. And I think you got to trust in that. But you're right, finding the right co author, the right artist to do that with. And then you're creating IP as well, So, Vito, what kind of tip would you give Neil at all as a writer that's always trying to figure out artists? I mean, you just sent me art today for a project that I've never seen this guy before that you reached out to. Like,
Right.
what's your trick? What is it that you do?
I I don't have a trick per se. I mean, I think what I try to do is I try to match the art with the tone. I try to find the right guy. Um, I've said this plenty of times on the show, I think, and definitely in person and public spaces, that whenever I come up with an idea, the first artist I think of is Dean. Only because he was the first artist I ever worked with. So to me, that's like, all right, that's um, not the pinnacle of achievement, but it's like, all right, let me start here and now I can figure out from there. And then like, as a project keeps going, I'll just start thinking, all right, well, this needs a little more a more fluid line, or this needs to be rougher, or this needs to be whatever, or the thing that always comes up is Dean's busy. So I can't ask him to do it. So let me just go ahead and, like just figure out somebody else. Um, we just had this conversation a couple of days ago when I just finished writing a short story for an anthology that Dean put me in touch with. And I didn't have an artist, and I was hoping that, an artist would be made available for the story. And they're like, well, who do you got? And I'm like, everybody's working on something. So we actually pulled Steve Walker, who's working on a different project of mine, to do. It's 3 pages, so I'm sure he's like not bothered by it. But I didn't want to like burden anybody, while they're already working with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the obstacle I run up against the most is, oh, I'm sorry, my year is full, or I can't take this on, but we should work together at some point, right? Like even John Broglio, who I've done 2 projects with, Saber and Nice Jewish Boys, right? He's working on 2 other things right now. And so he and I have been talking about a new project together that we want to pitch, the sci-fi book, but I kind of have to wait, right? And like we're both excited about it, right? And so invariably it just comes up against like who's available right now, right? And who's willing to sort of say, I'll lean into this when I have the time. Um, so that's why I think maybe I've leaned a little bit more towards prose over the last year or two because
Mm-hmm.
I can just do it myself.
Mm-hmm. Vito, you're writing a novel.
Writing a couple. Almost finished with one, and then I'm going to jump into a stray novel. Actually, like I don't know
Nice.
why, like I don't know that there's a market for a superhero novel, but it's what I mean. Create our own superhero novel. I'm sure there's a market for Spider-Man.
Alex Segura seems to be rocking it with
True, true.
2 novels now, I think,
So
So
the idea that I
there's a
want
market, I think. There's a market. It is, but what's the angle? Like again, that's the other thing. Like I never think about the angle or how it's going to be marketed or who's this for. It's always for me first, and that might be the problem, like but
Right. So in some cases, so I'm also working on 2 novels, and one of them is a superhero is sort of superhero laced. It's actually like a secret defender, like it's like a defenders novel, but it's my own defenders, right?
right,
Like
right.
we talk about filing off the serial numbers, right?
Yep, yep.
And it's really written as like for a YA audience, for young adults. And so maybe more like Y18, and so we're kind of focusing on that market a little bit. For me, I always want to write for my kids, right? I want to write something that they're going to read, and now I have three teenagers,
Hmm.
and so that's sort of the age I'm kind of writing for at the moment. Uh,
Hmm.
a lot of times I'm writing for me as well, but with the stories I want to read, the stories I would want to see out there. But sometimes I want to write something because like that's kind of my world right now, right? Like dealing with teenagers.
So do you think that because you guys have kids, and actually I technically have a biological daughter who's 16. Um, but when you say you're writing for your kids, you're writing for a certain age group as they get older, right? So does that mean like at some point you're writing like kind of like a SpongeBob SquarePants type thing, and then you're writing like a Power Pack type thing, and then eventually they hit 18. Are you forced to start writing porn?
So I'll tell you this, right? I always tell people that like if you look at the themes of nearly everything I've written, the theme of legacy is usually laced within it, right? Like fathers and sons, teachers and students, mentors and mentees, right? Like there's something about that. I don't know if it's me and my father, like or whatever, but like there's like and so when I was younger, when I was, when Dean, when you and I first met, right? Like Brownsville definitely has a lot of that. Big Con is huge about legacy, right? I was writing it as a son from the point of view of a son,
Mm,
trying to, come to terms with the legacy of my parents or older figures or what have you, right? But as I had kids of my own, I started to write things the other way, right? A
hmm.
father trying to deal with the legacy that I'm going to leave behind, or being responsible. Right? So Nice Jewish Boys is a lot about is really about that. And so I think it just is. It's less about like, oh, they're this age now, so this is the what I'm. It's more about like my relationship with them. When I wrote Savor, both John and I have daughters the same age. They're both 13, and they're both named Olivia, which is just a weird coincidence. And we decided we wanted to write an adventure story for our daughters. It was, create an adventure story, and it was just about looking around and saying, like, what's the kind of story that's out there, like that we would really want our daughters to read. My daughter was really into graphic novels at the time; his was as well, and so that's the story we made. As I get older, and my relationships with them will start to change, as they get older, as they start to go, my oldest son is going to start driving, eventually he'll go to college, right? I don't know how my stories are going to change. I'm sure a
Hmm.
lot of the aspects of legacy will form into a more like adult relationship, right, between a father and a son. And that
Hmm.
was really what the short film was about, right? Like as my son gets older, like what are the secrets I'm keeping? What are the secrets that he's not privy to, right?
Hmm.
And so I think
Hmm.
that's kind of what it is.
And I think you and Vito share this a similar route. I mean, Vito, you definitely write father-son stories, like
Oh, because I lost my father when I was 15. So I mean, like it's always about something straight. That's all Stray is. It's really about me and my father. At some point, like I've done like a couple of Puerto Rico uh, Reconstruction and Puerto Rico Strong. I did these two anthologies, mostly for my mom, because I've always seemed to focus on my dad, like, and I wanted to do something that honored my mother. So because she's the Puerto Rican side of my family, I did those two anthologies, and I try to do, like, I try to, incorporate uh, some level of female positivity in some of the stuff, as a result of my mom and my sister and my wife, so. Um, but funny enough, I don't really. I was expecting Dean to go, Vito, what have you written for your kids? And I was just like, nothing. No, no, it's for me. But like, and I think that saying that though is that um, the things that I have written that might be honoring my dad or my mom, I think they get something out of as well. Like they can put themselves in my shoes or something. I don't think either one of them has read Stray yet, which is fine. I think Sadie's starting to come into the right age to read it. So when she's ready, she'll read it. It's there, it's on the shelf.
But
right,
I
right.
mean, you and I were writing together a long time ago for the chemistry set, right? Which was one of
Mhm.
the online collectives, right? That was based off yours, Dean, off Activate.
Yep.
And so, Vito, like the stories you were, yeah, there it is.
There
There
it
it is.
is, right there. This was the one and only. chemistry set anthology, which is funny because like the story that's in here is not what I was doing for chemistry set. It's very
What was it? What is it? I forget.
it's the Fife story I did for Reflux.
Oh, right, right.
And the reason why is because the Tom Williams story that I did, Stuck, was serialized over a bunch of different uh, chapters, and I think it wasn't fitting for the anthology format. I'm sorry, Neil. Go ahead.
No, I had the same problem because the book I was doing with Kevin, with the story I was doing with Kevin
That's
Colvin,
right.
Toad Hill was like a serialized pirate story, or I don't
That
remember what
that wasn't Toad Hill,
that
was
was.
it?
Toad
No,
Hill. Yeah,
Toad
yeah,
Hill.
yeah, which was a lot of fun, and I wish we could have finished. But I think the story for the book was a story short I did with James Smith.
Hmm.
Oh, James Smith, man. I gotta look at that book again. We've had so much history with each other.
Yeah,
It's funny because I was thinking for your Ragman comic, a one shot, whatever. I would love to see you work with Corinne Shadmi.
I like Corin's work. Yeah,
It's very mystical looking, his work, you know?
actually, it's. I mean, I like Corin, but I pitched the original book with Bertozzi.
Hmm.
Oh, I could see that. I
Yeah,
could totally see that.
and I have a sketch somewhere upstairs. I'll send it to you guys at one point.
Right.
But a sketch that Nick did for me at I think Baltimore Comic Con of Ragman just kind of laying down on like
Yeah.
a stone thing. It was really cool.
Yep.
But
Yep.
what I was going to say was Vito, when you did Stuck, right? Like you can probably even for yourself when you were writing Stuck at that time, you were at a much different place than you are when you're writing Stray,
Oh my
right?
God, yeah. And
Yeah.
I don't think Stray wasn't even a thing at that point. Stray didn't like come into my brain until at least 5, 6 years later, if not more. At that point, I was working on my original creator-owned story, The Mercury Chronicles, which was my homage to like the Golden Age and stuff.
I
And
remember that. Yeah.
I feel like now, like I'm so far away from that story, like I don't think I would ever pick it up again. Like even if like all the stars aligned and I could, I had the right artist, right everything, I don't think I would go back to it. Like it was a rite of passage that I'm glad I did, but I don't think I would return to it.
And what I think is also super interesting is, I mean, Dean, I've been reading your work since Keyhole, right? Like, since the mini comic you did with Josh. And I think, like, even the Billy Dogma stuff, even you're doing Billy Dogma now, right? But I feel like, not that you haven't grown at all, I feel like there's always kind of like a theme, like there's like a heart to it. It's
Oh,
always
well,
kind of,
I appreciate that because to me that's the hardest thing to write is to try to write a character um or a story that matters. It's and especially in a short amount of pages. And at one point, at least with Billy Dogma, I felt like one of my mandates that every story had to have at least one punch and a kiss. I don't know why, but that was just, and then figure out everything around it and give it some kind of heart, right? And after a while, you can't keep going to that well. Like I couldn't do a monthly Billy Dogma comic. I'd run out of steam. It'd be like it would be, or it would just evolve in such a weird. Even when I was doing the Red Hook at Webtoon, it went from like a Brooklyn crime kind of comic to getting super cosmic and weird.
Mm.
Like I had no idea it was going to get like that.
but I can still even see the sort of the roots of what you were doing with Billy Dogma in the Red Hook, right? Like they're still
Absolutely.
like, they share the same DNA.
Absolutely.
And
Oh, yeah. I mean, you start after you do a lot of work, you start to discover your own trends, right? And just like you guys were talking about father-son stories and all that, I actually attempted to do a little bit of that in the Red Hook, father-son type thing. It was more of a mother-son for the majority. And I don't know, even my latest chest face comic, even though it's about a like kind of a loser comedian who gets mutated to where they put his face on his chest, he's still like trying to do 5 minute sets to get to his hour. And that's what you think the story's about. But at the end, it's about two mothers. It's about his mom, which he does the special about, and it's about another mother that's been transformed to a superhero against her will. And so I'm like, I guess I like moms. I don't know. Maybe I'm a MILF hunter. Who knows? But I did want to go to a couple other things, and I want to veer in one direction really quickly because what Vito, one thing I was talking about with Vito is a bootleg comic, and I'm not saying you should do a bootleg Ragman, but we had about a year or so ago talked about the concept of what is a bootleg, what makes a good bootleg comic, you know, like, and there seems to be more and more of that happening. Fife started off with a bootleg kind of comic, you know, like a Suicide Squad that you know evolved into Copra. Then there was Jim Mahfood has a Batman bootleg. Marty Keene, I don't know if you know Marty Keene, Neil Kleid, but he's done Spider-Man, he's done Wolverine, and now he just did Catwoman.
Mhm.
And it seems to be not his bread and butter, but it's the signal that boosts people to go, oh, I'll get this because this looks like fun. But then I'll check out what else you have, and then that takes you to his other comics. Oh, there's a guy named Ken Burdick or something like that. He does a weird comic called like Power, or it's all the DC trilogy characters, and it's funny
I've
because
seen that. I know what you're talking about.
really fun. It's
Yeah.
really good. But it's funny because the bootleg version of a comic of a character usually is more gross or ugly, or you know, it's not just necessarily an alternative version. I kept trying to think, what would my bootleg superhero comic be? Probably has to be the Fantastic Four, like whatever I think that would be, but not in honoring the Fantastic Four in their own continuity, but really trying to do something different with that concept. And that I don't have, you know.
It's funny. So back to that anthology I was talking about, right? Like, so I had the all. It was me and I don't know, do you know David Hazan, who wrote Nottingham over at Mad Cave.
I I've seen that.
Yeah,
Okay.
he just put out a book called Kosher Mafia with them, and so he and I came up with this like idea of like a Jewish anthology story with a bunch of short stories that kind of like live in like an Astro City kind of world, and
Right.
eventually all sort of culminate together. And so I've got a couple of characters in there, and the one that I actually like, if you ask me who my bootleg, I don't even think it would be Ragman. I was gonna do like a Silver Surfer New Gods kind of thing,
Mm.
which was more about like what does it mean to be a god in a in a religion where there's one god, right?
Mm.
Like,
Hmm.
can you call yourself like a god at that point, right? Like, and it was about like that character's relationship with himself and the
Hmm.
universe.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's no longer a god, it's just God.
yeah,
Yep.
it was about this character who like was like he was more like Orion, right? Like Orion from the New Gods,
Hmm.
basically like falls in love with a woman, like a Jewish woman,
Mm.
and he's like, I'm a god, and she's like, well, I only believe in one god, like
Hmm.
and the
Hmm.
god. So like, who are you? And so it was really interesting, like emotional conflict.
So they have like one bad date and they break up. I
And then
want
she
to see
calls him an
this.
anti-Semite, right? It's no,
And calls him.
um, but like that's the kind of heroes that I would like to. I mean, yeah, like I've definitely got my version of Ragman with the
And
serial.
I don't mean to keep beating you over the head with
No, no,
Ragman. I
no,
just know that that's a
no.
character.
I think it's less beating him over the head with Ragman and more beating him over the head with why haven't you or when will you put your version of blank out? I don't think, you
I
know,
mean,
Yeah.
you know me, you guys know that I love superheroes. Like superheroes, we all do, right? We all grew up with superheroes and that's how a lot of us got into comics, right? I would love to write my own. The problem being is just, confluence of the right partner, the right venue, and the right
Yep.
time.
Yep. Yep.
And I would again posit that the novel that I'm writing, this YA thing, is really my bootleg superhero thing right now, like
Hmm.
my
Hmm.
Defenders.
I was quickly scrolling through, and I don't know if you reposted it, but you did a huge Substack about Star Wars last year that I was skimming through now. It's a novel, this post. It's unbelievable. And it talks about how your love of Star Wars, growing up with Star Wars, like a lot of us, that was very similar to me, to my growing up, to working on Star Wars projects, to ultimately saying, I need to write my Star Wars story. Somebody let me write my Star Wars story, right? So I'm not asking you to spill beans here, but I've actually been posting, and I'm going to be doing it this week, my rejected Star Wars stories. And it was for Star Wars Adventures, so it was for kids kind of thing. And this is before they could figure out what they were doing at IDW with their Star Wars Adventures comics. So they didn't really know until they saw ideas what they wanted, kind of a thing. And then they could tell writers later on, oh, lean in this way, lean in, stay away from that kind of thing. But I wrote these three cold pitches, right? And I've already published two on my paid subscribers Substack. And then I have another one coming out, like I said, this week, and it's the third one of three that I did. But can you hint at or what kind of story you'd want to write or what character?
So it's really timely. So I have to be careful here. A year ago, and if people who know me know, I mean, if you go back and read that article, it's yes, I've loved Star Wars since I was a kid. There's, to my opinion, there's no bad Star Wars. I will take Star Wars in any way it comes. I imparted that to my children. They love Star Wars too. Like we're a Star Wars house. But yes, I do want to write a canon story. I want to write a story that basically you can say like this exists somewhere in the Star Wars universe. To the point where I tried to get a hashtag going about it right on
Sorry.
Twitter. Um, and so yes, I've been advocating and reaching out to folks. And a year ago, right before my birthday, right around now, right, um, an editor emailed me and said, "Happy early birthday! Pitch me some Star Wars comics." And so, after celebrating for a little bit, I did, and I wrote about 7 or 8 different pitches, all of them which were well received, but some were better than others in terms of like some of them were basically like, well, you can't rewrite this character, you can't do that, right? So they had to be a little broader, and so eventually they actually did narrow it down to one, and that's where we are right now. And
Oh,
I don't know what's happening with it. Maybe one day it'll happen, maybe one day it won't, and I'll keep advocating for myself to write Star Wars.
and we can't. Can you tell us who's? I don't know who's published. I know Marvel.
I don't want to really talk about that.
Okay, okay,
But
okay.
what I can say is that just getting the chance to do it was pretty thrilling. I can tell you like one that I've been pretty vocal about online that didn't get picked up, but that I would write in a heartbeat, which is I want to write a Star Tours story. I don't know if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, the Disney parks. They've got their Star Tours ride, which is like
Yeah,
the classic like simulator where you're basically like in a shuttle, which is like a tour shuttle that gets caught
right,
into.
right.
And so I'm a big Disney, we're also like a Disney Parks family.
Oh, you couldn't tell looking behind you.
Yeah, I know. I've got my Disney stuff in the
Ah,
background,
ah.
and I
So,
I jumped at the chance to pitch my Star Tours story, and they liked it, but apparently nobody wants to publish a Star Tours story, so
mm,
it is what
mm,
it is.
You know what's
okay.
crazy? I don't, it kind of goes back to the bootleg argument. I don't understand why we need permission to write these stories or to like, do you know what I mean? Like, I know it's not, it's copywritten and it's somebody else's IP and all that stuff, but like, it kind of bothers me that like, I need someone's permission to write Batman. Like, Batman's everybody's when you think about it, but like, but it's not,
I
or whatever.
I think you can. I mean, look, there's definitely fan comics out there, right? Like, there was a really great Star Wars fan comic. I forget what it's called. It's like Green Leader or something like that. It's like a space battle. It's like very like anime style, and it's thrilling. It's like
Hmm.
I'll send it to you. I'll try to find it. And it was like one of the best Star Wars comics I've ever read. I think the fact is you just can't sell it. Maybe like if you put it online or if you put it up on a Substack or or a newsletter or something.
I was gonna say fan fiction is probably even bigger than canon fiction, at
Yeah,
least with Star Wars and a bunch of properties, and as long as it's just fanfic, you can do it at what you want, probably a satire, parody, whatever you want to call it. I did have a thought, and I don't know if my saying it first or if I should ask you guys, and I don't remember Vito if I told you this idea, but because uh who owns Marvel and Star Wars? Disney.
Disney?
Because Disney owns both Marvel and Star Wars, how many years do you think it's going to take before they figure out a crossover? Right? Right?
Here's a funny thing, Dean.
And I have a thought of how it would how it would happen.
wait, are we into Patton Oswalt filibuster territory now?
Yes, yes.
Well,
Okay.
here's the thing. A couple of years ago,
Get your diapers.
I had a
Sorry.
different podcast where Scott Fogg and I talked about I think it was the X-Men, And like, what would you do with the X-Men if because they were still owned by Fox at that point, and Fox was still a thing at that point. And I said, if I were the people in charge of the X-Men franchise at Fox, and I wanted to make sure that Disney couldn't just come in and go, hey, you guys suck at this. Let us take over, or whatever, or pay or buy or whatever. The idea I had was Aliens versus X-Men.
Mm.
Because you already have the aliens in the Brood. You just do the Brood saga with the aliens, and it's a no-brainer. Fast forward, Disney bought Fox or bought the Fox assets, and then here we are. So
Yep, that could totally happen. I mean, I have a thought of how it would begin the crossover. I don't know if you want to say something first, Neil.
I don't have any thoughts. I haven't really dug into the notion of how you would cross these two over. I just want to write each one independently.
Absolutely, but I do think would be fun is mine starts off with a hand holding a lightsaber floating through space, right? Do we know what that hand is? What I'm talking about?
is it a hand that's a part of something or a hand that's separate?
Just a hand that's been severed holding a lightsaber.
Is it
Didn't
Luke?
that happen
Is
at
it
the end of
Luke?
Empire?
Is it
Yes,
Luke?
Isn't
so
that
that'd
Luke's
be
hand?
Luke's
Whatever
hand.
happened to his hand, and wasn't he holding a lightsaber that he lost? Right? It's floating through space, okay? And it comes and it hits a windshield, and it's the Guardians of the Galaxy ship, right? Or give me another ship. I don't know, something from Marvel. That's how it begins, like that's how you start. I don't know what if that hand has any properties anymore, or someone wants the DNA of Luke Skywalker and it still exists out there because he otherwise turned into a ghost. Well, he had both hands as old. Oh no, he had the robot hand, right? So I don't know if that hand disappeared when he disappeared. You know how they just kind of disappear when they
Yeah.
die. Um, I don't know. That's how I would start off my Marvel Star Wars story.
I don't know. Didn't they put out years ago an X-Men Star Trek comic?
Yes.
And what I loved about the X-Men Star Trek is I don't think that they ever explained how they were in the same universe. I think it was just like they were in the future. It was like obviously
Mhm.
they jumped to the future, but it was like a time travel story, and it wasn't like, hey, how are we suddenly in this Star Trek universe? It was more just like, yeah, Star Trek exists in the same universe as X-Men.
I think recently Marvel, I don't even know if it's finished yet, but Marvel was doing a Avengers Aliens story,
Yeah.
and it takes place in the future. So it's like a future Black Panther, future version. I think Ms. Marvel, is in it as well. So it's like the future version of the Marvel characters, but it takes place, I guess, when Wayland Yutani and or whatever the name of the company is,
Yeah.
like started exploring and stuff.
And now they're doing first they did Predator, now they're doing like Predator, and now they're doing Godzilla, the big Godzilla crossovers. And I just read one of those and it was really interesting because it was just like Godzilla's just there. He's just there. And so
That's
yeah,
my favorite thing, though, regarding continuity is like whenever you do a crossover, I don't care that much about what warp you had to walk through and what time travel you had to do. Just it's there, it's happening. Like I talk about Dean, like uh, Purple Heart will be showing up in Stray at some point in the near future, and I said to Dean, I was like, I don't. They're just in the same universe. Who cares? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Well, I
Let
was
let the what you want is to see what happens when they're in the same space.
Right?
How they got there actually doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
Unless there's a story caveat, to why they're we only have 24 hours or something or whatever, kind of a thing.
yeah, and I actually was just reading. I don't know if you've read Beasts of Burden by Evan Dorkin and
Devin Dorkin and
Bill Thompson and Benjamin Dewey, and I just read it for the first time. And at some point, like Hellboy shows up, and you're like, of course Hellboy is there. Like, why
Mhm.
wouldn't Hellboy be there?
Right.
Like, you just don't think about it. Just they're there.
Another thing I wanted to mark besides the fact that this is May the 4th, 2025, Star Wars celebration. There you go. Is I missed it yesterday, but also Free Comic Book Day happens around this time of the year.
Mm.
Did you guys go to Free Comic Book Day and get some
No, I
comics?
had to work personally, but I will be stopping by my store to pick up a couple of books.
So,
You mentioned comics.
so I we do every year. So like I keep Shabbos, right? The Sabbath, and so I can't sign or sell anything. Like I can't sign anything because of religious reasons. So I've never done like a free comic book day signing or anything. But we have a local shop that I walk the kids over to, and we'll go and pick up some free comics. And because I can't actually buy anything because we can't use money on Shabbos, I actually go the day before to the
Hmm.
comic store and I'll buy something from the comics. Like I'll buy some books to sort of pay it forward. But yeah, we walked over. It was really great. It was packed. It was fantastic. And some of the
Where'd you go?
A&S Comics in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Huh, okay, cool. I it's funny, it's an interesting concept. The word free is to try to galvanize people to open their wallets and buy comics while in the store. You know, like I'll give you this for free, but while you're here, check it out. And then often, and I've done a few of these, they'll have a table featuring artists selling their comics,
Right.
That
or
aren't
some of the
free.
store's comics, depending. So I mean, I like the idea that engenders that because also I'm just worried that more comic shops are dwindling, Uh, and
Yeah.
going back to the crowdfunding idea, like I am not my Kickstarter comics are not in stores. There is no impulse buy. It just doesn't make sense right now the way I work, or the sales I yield right now. And like I got Ron and Nick, Ron Hill and Nick Bertora, at JHU Comics saying, dude, we want you in the comic shop. We want to do signings. You got to make something for the store.
Mhm.
Right. But I think a store like that, right? Like a store in a major metropolitan area, like a Forbidden Planet or a Midtown Comics, right? Like there's enough foot traffic and there's enough like destination folks coming to it that I think those stores maybe they won't be fine, but they'll survive, right? I'm more concerned about the stores like mine, right, that are sort of like smaller town stores that are struggling. Maybe there's not a lot of people going in. I mean, I'll tell you, my store A&S, they don't carry a lot of indies. They carry
Mm-hmm.
Image, they carry a couple of dark horses, but and the Skybound stuff. But like, I've asked for stuff, right, like specific indies and specific issues where they're like, yeah, I mean, there's really no call for it, right? Like you have a couple people who will ask for it, but it doesn't make sense for us to order it. And so that's tough to hear, right? It's tough to hear that really they're dependent on Marvel and DC, just those books.
Yeah, no, I've heard. I mean, obviously that's the case, and a lot of those stores also have to become other kinds of stores, games and
Funko Pop,
toys, and you're right, all that stuff. So, except they're probably not having to pay the rent that Forbidden Planet has to pay next to the Strand. The Strand will probably have the spillover of book readers, that maybe grab a graphic novel at the Strand, but then they might want some comic books. And what's great, I was in Forbidden Planet 2 weeks ago, and I haven't been there in a while. And they have a back wall of all the new stuff, and then right as you turn around, when you look the other way, tons of indie comics. So like they're there, and they have people coming in to do commission type stuff. But again, I haven't figured that relationship yet with my recent personal comics that I've been publishing. So I need to think about that. But this idea of doing this anthology, I wish it was this something you were talking to a publisher about?
the Jewish Comics
Yeah.
Anthology. Yeah, I spoke to one or two folks. Actually, we were going to try to do it as a charity anthology right
Mm-hmm.
around the time when October 7th happened, to
Mm.
try to, you know, um, help some of the families of the hostages and those who were killed. And the money was going to kind of go towards that, or to Magin David Adom, which is like the ambulance company that is sort of like the Israeli Red Cross. Um, and so we were trying to figure out like the best path forward, and it just the publisher didn't want to really do a superhero book at the time, and
Mm.
so it just kind of died on the vine.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Are you watching Andor?
I am. I just did a little drawing. I every May the 4th I do a little Star Wars sketch and I throw it up online, and I did one of his little droid B2
Mm,
EMO.
mm, hmm.
Yeah.
I it's funny because I saw the first season, and I remember taking a while to get into it because it's a lot of minutia. There's a lot of like, and then this is how if you do say this thing, this is how it gets to the senator or the blah 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 or the. And I feel like once again, I finally watched the first 3 episodes,
Of the
and
new
I'm
season
like,
or the first one?
of season two. Sorry, the 3 episodes of season two, and I'm like, I don't know if I care about to know all this stuff. Like it's well written and well produced, and but I don't care. Like I don't know how you're feeling and I'm not trying to be like a grumpy
No,
fan.
no, no, fine.
I just I want more than what's happening, I guess. Or maybe I don't need to know all this to know that the empire, becomes bad. And this is showing again the origin of how it all happened.
Yeah, I think the struggle is, and I know that there's a lot of people who are going to jump down my throat for saying this, is
And
it's George Lucas went on record saying that Star Wars, they're kids' movies, right? They're movies made for children, and they're popcorn fit flicks, right? And so most of the mainstream Star Wars stuff you see is sort of geared towards that. And Rogue One and Andor and one or two of the other ones out there are really like Star Wars for adults, right? It's about the mundanity of life under the Empire's thumb, right? And it's about the minutia, it's about the politics. And so if you're hoping for like lightsaber battles and that kind of thing, like that's not this. And I think
right,
I think there has to be both. I think you have to have a balance there. You need to bring, you need to have a skeleton crew and you need to have an Andor. You need to have, got the Skywalker saga, and then you need to have the Clone Wars, right? Like the cartoon. I don't know. I really enjoy it. I think there's definitely slow moments, right? But
it says that, you know what it is. I think I'm also. I mean, you're turning 50. I'm going to be 58 at the end of the month, and I'm like, I can't keep track with certain things. Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe it's a case of there's certain nuances that are happening between characters looking at each other. I'm like, I know how a romance movie works, but I don't know how like a rebel story works necessarily. Like,
right, it's a story of
watch
a
out,
woman.
tipping their nose kind of thing. And I'm like,
It's an espionage story, right? And
it,
by
it
the
is.
way,
And Cassian isn't going to die. So whenever there's a threat, you're just rolling your eyes like he's going to get out of this. Okay. Every time until he dies in Rogue One. I loved Rogue One a lot. I was surprised by Rogue One. I think most people were like, when you start to realize, spoiler, that every character that you are being introduced in Rogue One is going to die because you never heard of them in the rest of the story. And then you've attached feelings to some of these characters halfway through the movie. It's like, oh my God, wait a second. They're all going to die, every single one. And they do, you know?
yeah,
It's pretty brutal. And then it ends with one of the fiercest Darth Vader, entries that you've ever seen. And then it ends on Princess Leia. And you're like, oh shit, George Lucas directed the sequel to Rogue One.
but but I will tell you, my kids have tried to sit through Rogue One twice, and it doesn't take.
Right, right.
I still haven't.
You never saw it, Vito?
I've tried watching it, and like the first 10 minutes, I'm just like, I'm going to bed.
Wow.
Yeah, like I tried, and that's not because of a lack of desire. Like I've tried more than once, at least three times, and like it's like how a lot of folks don't like Solo. I love Solo. I think
I
it's
love
fantastic.
I love Solo.
I love
Yeah,
so. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I think it's
Yeah.
great, and like a lot of I love Skeleton Crew for exactly like the reasons why Neil was saying Neil. Um, Neil is the name of the character, Dean, if you've never watched it. It's the greatest character in all Star Wars. I don't care what anybody says. Um, but exactly for the reasons why Neil was saying, like there should be something for everybody. There should be something for all of the audiences. It doesn't have to be exclusive to one or the other. Um, like a lot of people, I used to get a lot of crap from people at work that like Star Wars that don't like the Last Skywalker, not the Last Skywalker, the Last Jedi. Excuse me, the second, the one that Ryan Johnson did, and I said, no, don't you understand? Like the burning of the Jedi Temple, the old ways don't matter anymore. It means everything's open for. And then what do? They do is they bring the Emperor back. It's like, God damn it! Like can't even like follow your own canon.
Yeah, I mean they're trying to. I think they do fan service sometimes, where they're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
the fans are mad. Let's make the fans happy. I'm like, I actually loved that. You said Ryan Johnson was the director.
Yeah.
I actually really loved that movie. I thought that was a really
And like the
fun
Cory
movie.
Doctorow treatment that went around after for the third one that I thought was fantastic.
Oh, I didn't see that. But anyway, I don't know. Star Wars is such a big topic, and then there's, I grew up with not I grew up with reruns of original Star Trek. Like, and I know that that's very different from Star Wars, but that's another thing I'm thinking. Will there ever be a crossover there? Has that ever
Well,
been done?
Doubt
but
it.
we're old enough to remember Battlestar Galactica, where you got to have Star Wars on TV every week. Same thing with Buck Rogers. You
Yep,
got to have that kind of entertainment on TV every year. I mean, your
yep,
mileage may vary in terms of special effects and everything, but it was still worth it.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up soon, but before we do, I don't know. Did you have any questions, a topic or something, Neil, you wanted to talk about, or do
I
we
mean,
cover?
I think we covered kind of one of the key things that I wanted. It was like understanding how you guys are sort of dealing with the rough state of the industry at the moment, just in terms of doors closing and potential
I mean,
opportunities
I think for
opportunities
me,
shutting
like
down because of printing issues and things like that.
from what I understand, there's not much of a with the tariffs and stuff. It doesn't affect printed material.
Yeah,
I think it only affects certain other goods. So I don't think it really affects printing comics overseas and stuff. And I think most of us print domestically anyway. In turn, like Comics Wellspring, Kablam, they're all based in the States. Um,
Mixam, Fireball.
yeah, but in terms of like the state of the industry, it's funny that like I've become more and more disconnected from stuff like what's happening with Diamond, what's happening with other aspects of creation, and I've just been like kind of tunnel vision with my own stuff and just like worrying about all
it's
right,
interesting.
let's
Yeah, I mean,
let's
it's interesting with the diamond stuff because I've spoken to a number of smaller publishers who are crowdfunding, who are kind of doing small print runs, what have you, and because of the sort of instability, have really kind of wondered whether they're going to be around in a year or two.
yeah. There's no guarantee because um, a lot of those companies are owed money from Diamond. And the truth of the matter is, when you declare bankruptcy, you are kind of absolved of paying those people back, those publishers back. And so, like, then you think about the publishers that owe money to creators or whatever and stuff. And so, how are they going to pay them if they get? And it's a whole thing. And the other thing too is that you got guys like Skybound, um, Top Cow. They've all dipped their foot in crowdfunding, so they're finding ways to get the product out without dealing with traditional distribution. You know, so they're just doing what we've been doing for the past couple of years on our own. So
Yeah, but I think, and Dean, you mentioned this earlier because I know because of the post writer strike landscape and post LA fire landscape in Hollywood, you see a lot of like screenwriters coming to do comics and doing them and crowdfunding them, right? Um, there's a lot of there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of noise out in the crowdfunding landscape. Every other week I see somebody's crowdfunding something. How do you get your signal out? How do you kind of get above all that? Especially when you've got Skybound out there putting out, GI Joe Transformers, which I would have loved to have, bought, but or other, larger products via Kickstarter or what have you.
Well, it's unfair to even mention Transformers because it comes with such history that it's almost like you can't even talk. Like that's a realm we will never hit, right? But I do think more than trying to ask for someone's money between 15 and $50, you're asking for people's time. And I mean, what I mean time is like, do you even see me in the algorithm at all? And if you do, did I say something enough for you to be able to click once to go to my Kickstarter and then maybe click one more time to buy the thing? And that's the hardest hurdle, I think, is to wave your hand, entice someone with a headline or an image enough to get their curiosity peaked to then go to the thing, take another minute or two, and be like, yeah, I'll help this. I'll support this. Oh, that looks cool to me.
You know
You
what you're
know, and the,
talking about, though? You're talking about the digital version of Artist Alley.
yeah,
Like,
I mean, like when if I do New York Comic Con again and I'm in Artist Alley, it's its own con, you
right.
know, and so many tables. I just did Bix, you know, a Brooklyn Independent Comic Showcase, the St. Mark's Comics Show, and it expanded from like I don't know 100 tables to 400 or something like that, and it became more cumbersome, you
But it's
know.
again like talking about, like, I think Neil even said it, like, trying to get your signal out there amongst all these other signals that are going off at the same time. And it's like, you know, how do you make yours not the loudest, but the most, like,
Compelling.
the music instead of like the noise, like,
It's as compelling as it is. In other words, if I say the word chest face, what the hell is that? Somebody might be like, "That's stupid. Go away," or "That's so weird. I want to know what it is." I mean, if you say the first a new Jewish anti-hero or something, maybe people who are Jewish, like the thing that was funny for me, Neil, when I did Juice, is like I noticed that a lot of people who walked in to check it out that maybe weren't really comic book buyers or fans, but they liked the space and they wanted to check out what this was. I think the things that did the best were clearly Jewish adjacent or something about being Jewish or Jewish history. They were looking for something like that versus my Red Hook comic, or COVID cop. Like, and I get it, that could be a polarizing word, but I didn't do nearly as well because I didn't have that one thing that was Jewish,
Right.
because it's a specific show,
Right, and obviously you have a guy like me or a guy like Arnon Shore, or Sherry Pear, or folks out there who our work is very, and that's the audience that we're creating for.
Absolutely,
But I
absolutely.
can't tell you whether my Jewish mafia book is going to do as well at the Artist Alley in New York Comic Con.
Right. Right. But if you target your Jewish comic book, let's call it, to Jewish audiences, I do feel like there is there is a way to make a living at that. I do believe
I
I was just
agree. I agree,
what?
but it's a little limited, right? It's a little
It's
limited.
limited because it's like I'll explain it in this way. I know a lot of black cartoonists that don't want to do the Black Comic Con because it's just for black people, like, so it's like, or I know female cartoonists that don't want to go to just an all female panel or all female because they realize, oh, we're segregating ourselves,
mm,
and we're
Yeah.
trying to reach a broader audience, right? But trying to reach a broader audience, it is tougher because you're competing with everyone.
right.
But in New York City, we're so used to it being a melting pot that it doesn't bother me if you got this, black, gay, Jewish, whatever, Catholic, like superhero memoir. I'm used to that. But I think for some people, they're like, it gets too much, right?
Right,
And
but what I was trying to say is that I mean I agree with all that. Like when I'm on the Jews and comics panel, right? Like it's a little limiting, but what I mean is even within the Jewish audiences, right? Like you'll never see the big con in a Jewish bookstore because
why?
there's cursing and sex in it. And
Huh.
so most traditional Jewish bookstores don't want to put that on their shelves.
I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
didn't know that. That's interesting. Have you ever considered doing a more Jewish friendly version of that? Like edit a couple of things out and
No, my opinion is the story is what the story is, right?
oh, I agree. I
I've got a
agree.
vision, and I'm not going to compromise that vision. And
Right. Right.
one, yeah, that's just kind of who I am. Would I want to tell a more all ages Jewish story that could, like, yeah, I've pitched some of those before, and they haven't really gotten far, but at some point, I'd love to do that, right? Do something
Right.
again for kids or for a more not maybe adult audience, but not as like hardcore, right? Which is super funny because the thing I'm pitching right now is like probably the most violent, curse laden thing I've ever. The thing I'm
Sure.
working on now. It's very
Sure.
very adult.
I'm excited for that. And again, I'm not trying to merge
I
and
know I
mash
get
up.
it. I get it. Yeah.
No, but I'm actually just thinking right now because one of the things that earlier on when me and Vito started doing this podcast, one of the things, and we don't talk about it a lot, is that he wears a crucifix and comes from a Catholic faith. Catholic, right, Vito?
Me?
Yeah. Wait, no, what are you, Christian?
Yeah, but I don't wear anything, man.
I thought you did. I thought you
No,
did.
why would I?
Is it in your pants? Is it in your
Yes,
underwear? Okay, good, good,
it's
good.
the horn pepper thing
Stop.
that Italians
No,
have.
why are you doing this? But it'd be interesting to have you guys write a comic from the points of views of a Jew and a Christian, like, handcuffed, to get through a thing, like I don't know.
I like Saw.
Maybe, or like Saw. Was there a movie with was it Harry Belafonte and Tony Curtis or something like that, where they're like,
They were in Saw.
and they were in Saw, and yeah, 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 from 1952, the
Yeah.
1952 version of Saw. But I don't know, man. I'm just always trying to like come up with ideas that maybe would make people go, I want to read that comic. I got to see what that is.
Yeah, no,
I guess
same.
the thing, the job is to try to come up with ideas that are, when I say undeniable, I don't mean that, it has to, it's like lightning in a bottle, obviously, but something that makes people go, I got to know more about that. And that's the biggest trick of all. Even if you read the comic and it's a little more normalized, there's something about the title and the cover that makes you go, what is that?
Yeah, so it's a little tricky because like look, obviously nobody wants to get pigeonholed. And I don't think I am, right? I don't think I'm pigeonholed as a Jewish writer, right? I'm a writer who's Jewish.
Right.
But any story that I've told with Judaic themes, it's because I had something to say about it, right? It's,
Right.
Brownsville, the Big Con, Nice Jewish was all of them came from a place of like, I've been looking inward at my religion, at my community, and there's something that I think is worth bringing to the world, right? But I would have to, I would have to have the same thing for any like Jewish superhero story that I would want to tell, right? I probably could tell like a good, and I'm just going to throw one out, like Moon Knight story, right? Like based
Mhm.
on something about my history, my community, my religion. But I'd want to like really think of the right thing to say. I wouldn't want to just like try to shoehorn something in there because like somebody wants me to tell a Jewish story, right?
Right.
It really has
Right.
to come from that place of like I actually have something that I think needs to come out, needs to kind of be told, and then I
Yeah.
can kind of frame the story with the right characters around it.
Is there a
Right.
security in that kind of writing what you know edict that we've always been told? Where you would prefer, no, maybe not prefer, but you're more comfortable with doing something like that as opposed to, uh, I'm going to pick the most white Anglo-Saxon Protestant that I can think of, Captain America. It's like, is there a kind of security in that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I actually do think I would have something to say with Captain America, but I do think that there are characters who I just have nothing to add to, right? Like I'll be honest, there's like three or four characters out there that I just have no interest in writing because I find no connection to them, right? A lot of espionage characters. Harley Quinn is a character that I just have nothing, like I have nothing to add to that character, right? And by the way, I believe Harley Quinn is Jewish, just
Oh,
as a side note. Um, and I think that's okay. I think like that's okay for me to say like as far as I'm told, everyone I know has a Nick Fury story inside them, right? Everybody wants to tell some sort of a Nick Fury story. I have no Nick Fury stories inside me. Nothing I want to say about the character, nothing I want to say about that world. Just not something I can relate to. Um, that being said, gun against head, I probably could come up with something, right? Because that's the part of being a writer. You do the research and you find something to say. I would much rather, and yes, it's much easier for me to write a Ben Grimm story because it would come easier to me, right? When I wrote Nice Jewish Boys, right, that story is literally set in my hometown. It's set here in my community. The writing came easier to me because I could relate to it better. I knew it, right? I knew what I have to say. When I write something like even Brownsville, right, I have to do more research. Um, and so I think it really kind of depends on like the character you've got and the story that you need to tell, right? I don't know.
I agree. I
I think that's
agree.
fair. I mean, I again, like, I don't begrudge it, or nor am I criticizing it. It's just a matter of, like, is there a method to the madness, so to speak?
What to what madness?
I mean, like, like just zeroing in on more Judaic themed characters than to not. Like it's because you feel like you can bring something to it, is what you were saying.
Well, I think it also it's two things, right? So one is I have something to say. I have a unique point of view, right? Something like my own learned history that I can kind of bring to the table. But I also think there's a little bit of a responsibility to, as a Jewish writer, to want to give those characters the representation they deserve.
Mm.
I think there's, especially, at Marvel and DC, there's not a lot of writers out there positioning those stories from Judaic theme points, right? Like from Judaic points of view. You do have folks out there like Dan Slott's done it, Bendis does it, right? There are folks out there who, even Jed McKay in his in the Moon Knight stories he's telling now will kind of do it, but it's very few and far between. It's like the odd Hanukkah story here or there, and it's not consistent and it's not as prevalent as some of the other characters. And so I think that, for me, I'm very much an advocate for more Jewish representation in mainstream comics and more original Jewish stories in comics in general, right? Like I'd like to see a lot more original heroes out there and original stories that are set within the Jewish community. You do have like, Dean, you were at the convention, you were at Juice. There's definitely a lot of people out there telling those stories. I just don't think they have as much of a platform as, Batman or Captain America.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I can't think of, and I know we're making it Jewish again. We're talking about being Jewish. Like, um, who is the biggest? Isn't Superman basically Jewish?
Superman is Moses.
He's Moses.
Yeah.
So like the most popular, most famous superhero of all has been imparting some kind of Jewish wisdom in small and significant ways, you know? So you kind of that's the hardest one to beat and the hardest one to crack. Because if you ask me right now to write a Superman story, I would not know what to do. I'd have to really think, who is my Superman? Because you come from where, from you first. And I'm like, I don't know. I have thoughts of what I might want to draw, maybe, but that's a tough one. And I think Vito, we've talked about that as well.
Mhm. Yeah, like I've actually started putting together. It's a speculative kind of project that I'm doing. That if I know it won't happen, but the idea that Superman's going to possibly go into the public domain in a couple of years, what happens if everyone gets to write Superman? So I'm like, all right, I'm going to write a Superman story for that maybe doesn't call him Superman, maybe calls him ostensibly a bootleg, I guess, like, but the framework of it is that this is Superman in everything but name.
And you know what's really funny? Mickey Mouse, or not Mickey Mouse, but the early version of Mickey
Steamboat
Mouse,
Willie, yeah.
Steamboat Willie, is now public domain. And what do people do when something becomes public domain?
I make a horror
They
movie out of
make a
it.
horror movie, or like Eric Larson, God bless him, in Savage Dragon, made him
Yes.
this really horny mouse that's trying to fuck Savage Dragon's girlfriend or something, like in really pornographic way. It's funny, but that's what people seem to do. I think the character is out there and you can do what you want, they
Yeah,
just fuck with them for
I
some
don't have
reason.
that desire, I don't have that desire
Me
to see
neither.
that. I want to just, have not reverence or, respect or anything per se, but I want to tell a legit, earnest story. You know what I mean? Like same thing with a Batman or a Flash or something like that. If I'm not able to crack the pitching thing, which I don't really care to pitch anything anymore. Um, if I'm able to, get that opportunity, and I think that's the other thing too that we're overlooking is that being assigned a character and pitching a character are two totally different things. So
Absolutely.
like I'm sure like Neil, if you were assigned writing Wolverine, you would write it. It has nothing to do with, your preferences or your
That's the job of a writer. The job of a writer is to
exactly
find your way into the character, right? Find
right,
your way into the character and do homage to what's come before.
right.
When we talk about Superman specifically, right? How many millions of Superman stories are out there? It's really finding like what's your way into that character and what do you have to say? What can you bring to the character that nobody's done
Right.
before?
But I was going to say maybe this will put the button on the whole conversation of what to do today as comic book creators and getting our work to be seen and out there. We have all the tools that all the kids have, and they're doing much better with it than we are. But I think, and I said this again, I said this on this podcast, I think I quit comics about 2.5 years ago. And by quitting, meaning not worrying as much about pitching, not worrying about keeping up with the comics to find out what the continuity is. I can't tell you I don't know who an X-Men is right now today. I can't tell you. I read Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, anything that Mark Waid writes, and maybe a handful of others. Savage Dragon. I came to Savage Dragon about 4 or 5 years ago when Eric Larson decided to make it like a weird underground comic. It's bananas, that comic. But I don't read that much, and plus graphic novels, right? Like books that done in ones usually. And when I felt that lack of pressure to keep with the Joneses, as it were, is when it freed me up to just say, I'm just going to try and make comics like this more than ever now. And I think that's what maybe the realm you're entering, Neil, is like, not that you gave up, but in giving up, when I gave up is when I got closer to what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's definitely, look, I'm a fan at heart. Like, I'm a fan of these characters. I'm a fan of these mythologies, and there's stories that I would love to tell. I would definitely say when I was younger, I'd spend a lot more time trying to, crack the 8-page Spider-Man story, right? Or, chase down like a one-shot. And now at this point, it's like, all right, if it happens, it happens. I'm not gonna lay my life or my career on it. Like, I have my own stories to tell, and I'll go tell those stories. I think I also have the luxury of being able to do that versus a lot of other folks because I have a day job, because I have, a second income in the family, and I can do that, right? I can sort of say like I can find my own balance with comics, and I think that's at our age the important thing. It's like you find your balance, like where you say, okay, this is the story I tell. These are the stories I tell, and this is how I'm going to get them out into the world. And if I don't write another Marvel or DC book for it, like that's okay.
So when you're a kid, you are having a kid response. As a mature adult, you're having a mature response to the material now. And really, it is mostly for kids, a lot of it, even though there are adult comics with mature themes, so on and so forth. But the majority, like reminding people that ultimately Star Wars is for kids, which is why when Return of the Jedi came out, and I was getting a little too old for something called the Ewok, okay? But certain kids, it was the right age for it. That was perfect. Ewoks, I can't explain Jar Jar Binks because maybe they were thinking that would be for the new kid. And I think even kids were like, what the hell is this? But it's another conversation. But it's just knowing what you're good at and celebrating what you're good at. And I think, like, if you like it, other people will like it, hopefully. And just get the word out there.
Yeah, I mean that's the plan. Yeah.
All right.
Ready?
Do we solve comics?
We solved it. Its comics are done now. We solved it.
We solved it. No more comics, people. It's done.
It's all radio plays from here on out.
That's right. I love those. All right, Neil, thanks so much for talking with us, man.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Let's hit it up. Yay, yay.
Yay, yay.
Good night.